exceptional. Exceptional.
Technical difficulties there. All right. Will Joey Votto be ready for opening day? Some comments he made here recently make us wonder about that. But I know this. If the Reds were to add Johnny Cueto to the rotation, this pitching staff would be shored up in a way that I don't think we estimated it could be throughout the offseason. We are going to talk about that and more on this live Aloha Friday of the Locked On Reds podcast. You are live.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Reds. Aloha, and welcome to the live Aloha Friday edition of the Locked On Reds podcast. Thanks for making the Locked On Reds podcast your first listen of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and we are free and available on all podcasting platforms. I'm your host, Stephen Offenbaker, alongside Jeff Carr, and we have a passion for baseball. We have a passion for the Cincinnati Reds, and we have taken that passion and turned it into information for you. On today's live show, we are going to dig into Joseph Daniel Votto's comments that he made this week on the Reds Hot Stove League program. We are going to discuss his impact on the Reds lineup if he's healthy and playing, and also if he's not. I know that's a subject that's going to make Jeff a little sad if we talk about that for too long, but we are going to dig into it. We are also going to continue our conversation from this week in regards to bringing Johnny Cueto home as a member of the Reds rotation. We're going to talk about the impacts that he could have on the rotation and strategies that the Reds could utilize with or without him in order to build out this rotation heading into 2023. Jeff, I think a good place to start is going to be with the comments of our good friend Joseph Daniel Votto, because he said some things that I think caught people off guard in regards to his health. But if you really sit back and think about it, it's not as big a deal as it sounds like on the surface. And really, I'm not surprised at where he says he's at in his recovery.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I think that, we always talk about, you never doubt Joseph Daniel Votto, but when he says that he's not quite there yet, it gives us pause. And as Reds fans, we get a little bit apprehensive. However, if we expected Joseph Daniel Votto's shoulder to be completely healed by this point in the offseason, then I think we really are overly optimistic, because I didn't expect it. I thought that, he's probably still going to be in the middle of his rehab, and maybe he misses like the first week of spring training or something like that. But I still don't necessarily think this is going to affect his status right now for opening day.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at this realistically from where we are when he said it's not 100% to where it needs to be, he has 2 full months before he really needs to even start ramping up baseball activity. 3 full months nearly, just shy of 3 months till opening day. That's a lot of time to get that shoulder strengthened the rest of the way. Now, we've seen video of him out there taking swings and doing baseball things. So it's not like he's not already preparing in that regard. I think it's just a matter of, he still feels weakness in that particular shoulder, and that's going to come with time. And I had rotator cuff done years ago, and there's still a slight difference in my shoulder compared to the other one. And I'm not being taken care of by professional trainers. So, I think that, it may be also a case of Joey learning to adjust to the fact that that shoulder may just always feel a little different, even though the strength is there. And even though he's able to do the baseball thing. So, I think, Joey's not had a significant injury like this in his shoulders or arms. So this is going to be a learning process for him as well.
Yeah. And it's something, remember, that he said he really had been dealing with since 2015. And it had just gotten to the point where he needed surgery to repair it. And the fact that whenever he comes back, we're talking about a clean shoulder. He had been playing since 2015 on a messed up shoulder, and he still had some pretty good years in there. So I'm very intrigued about that. That's why you and I keep saying that whenever he's back, we're talking about comeback player of the year, Joey Votto. We're not worried about that at all. But let's talk for a minute about if he does miss opening day, because that is something we've heard a couple of folks say. Like, I believe I saw Mark Sheldon say on Twitter, like, he is not convinced he'll be back for opening day and things like that. There's an encouraging part to this, which it's not encouraging to have Joseph Daniel Votto out of the lineup, but the Reds are prepared in the event that happens.
I think they are. As a matter of fact, I said to you off air when we were prepping for this that I thought the Reds lineup was actually a little bit better suited for construction without Joey, just because of all of the positional flexibility and the ability to move the domino pieces around. If Joey's not in this lineup, I think what we'll see is first base by committee. I think we'll see catcher by committee. I think it's possible we'll see a couple of the outfield positions by committee, all rotating between that first base position, the designated hitter position, the catcher position, and the corner outfield positions. You're going to be able to slot guys in and out and do a lot of different things. That flexibility is not going to be there if Joey, who can only first base and DH, is put in the mix. It kind of slows down David Bell's ability to slide guys around.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to note that in years past, it's always felt like the Reds, plan for injuries was, well, we hope that so-and-so is going to come up and figure it out. We hope we have the next man up and ready to go and blah, 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 blah. That's not the case anymore. The Reds are prepared, at least in the event that Joey Votto misses significant time. Plus, I also think that Nick Krall was like pseudo preparing this roster in the event that Joey retires as well. Not necessarily that he's going to retire in the middle of this season, but whenever he leaves the Reds organization, this roster is like to a point where I am comfortable saying they are ready to move on. We've never really thought that they had a first base prospect in the mix, but we've always kind of thought that, they could move Tyler Stevenson to first base and keep his bat in the lineup, keep him healthy, things like that. They're not going to do that 100% of the time this year, but he will be a guy that is in that mix. Like you said, it's going to be a mix. It's going to be a roster churn a little bit for guys at first base and guys at catcher and guys at DH. They've said for the last couple of years since the DH was instituted in the National League that it was going to be a spot to rotate guys through, not a spot for somebody to sit and hang out, and that's going to be their starting gig. So I'm encouraged by the way that the roster shapes out in the event that Joey's hurt. Now, the interesting thing, and I want to address this too, that you noted, is that the lineup is more flexible without him, because you're looking at a lineup that, should Joey Votto be healthy, he should be batting third. So without him, who slots into that third position? Because if they come up opening day, we know who's batting fourth, and we know who's probably batting first or second. Jonathan India probably in one of those two spots, but who bats third?
That's a great question, because I don't know that there's a clear-cut answer for lineup construction on this team right now. There's a lot of question marks about how guys are going to perform. I guess if you were just throwing names out there, probably Will Myers, maybe.
He's probably the
de facto number 3 hitter, and in front of Tyler Stevenson. I'll tell you this: I don't think there's anybody on this team right now heading, at least on paper. Somebody's gonna stand out and establish themselves, but there's nobody on paper right now that I look at as being good protection for Tyler Stevenson in this lineup, like somebody that's gonna help him be able to get pitches when his at bats come around. I think that it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because for me, probably Jonathan India is your leadoff guy. I would love to see a situation where Spencer Steer ends up as a top of the lineup kind of guy, maybe in the 2-hole. If Joey is Joey in the 3-hole, without Joey, probably Will Myers, then Tyler Stevenson. And then if Joey's not in the 3-hole, maybe Joey's in the 5 if he's healthy and playing. It's very interesting. I think Joey Votto has reached a point in his career, even if he's healthy, that we probably do see him moving down the lineup a little bit, unless he really does this crazy 30 home run comeback player of the year type of campaign. Then he can hit wherever he wants.
And I wonder too, and this might give some people a little bit of heartburn, but at least on opening day, if Joey Votto's not in the lineup, do we see Nick Senzel in the 1 or the 2 spot? Because there's a chance you could shuffle Jonathan India around, leave Will Myers in the 5th spot, maybe put India in the 3rd spot or the 2nd spot, and your top 2 guys. That might be very interesting to see what they do there, because like you said, I agree. There's a couple of spots that are intuitive in this lineup, and there's a lot of spots that people need to prove that they either do or don't belong there.
Maybe they'll have a little promotion before each game. David Bell come out to the home plate, hat in his hand. Hat in his hand with all the names inside, and he'll just pull the names. Batting third for the Reds today, Tyler Stevenson.
Home plate umpire. You got a notepad. You ready to take notes here?
Write this down. Someone write this down.
Yeah. No, it's going to be very interesting, because this lineup is not set. There's definitely some question marks. There's some upside with guys, and like we've even we've been happy about Spencer Steer. Could he acquit himself as a number 2 type guy? That's a lot to put on a dude in his first real full season, but I mean he's probably in the mix. There's not a lot of guys on this roster that are on the short list to be at the top of this lineup right now.
I think that's true. Here's what we know for sure. We know that Joey Votto is not ready right now today. If the season started today, the shoulder isn't fully healed, but we didn't expect it to be. The Reds do have a plan. We may not necessarily understand what all of it is, but they do have a plan in place should Joey not be ready for opening day. And it's going to be very interesting watching how things shake out in spring training as we get closer and closer to starting the season against the Pittsburgh Pirates.
I'm waiting for the first comment of somebody to say shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic. Go. All right. Anyway, there's been some rumors here recently that Johnny Cueto may be returning to the Queen City. One thing is for certain, he will make this pitching staff way better if he does. We're going to tell you exactly what kind of impact he could have here in just a moment. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Looking for a delicious treat, but don't want all of the fat and the calories? I mean, it's New Year's. Everybody's got a resolution going on right now. Most of us probably thinking, let's get a little bit healthier. And you got to try Built Bar. We just got through the holidays. And, with that whole eating better thing, it's a little bit difficult to kind of dive into it wholeheartedly because, well, you probably think you got to compromise on taste, right? I've got just the thing for you. You got to go to Built. With Built, healthy is tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious you won't think that they're good for you, but they are. What makes Built Bar so good? Well, for starters, they're all covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. There's not like additives that make it taste chocolatey. Built has it all with 100% real chocolate. Whether you're talking about milk chocolate, dark chocolate, or white chocolate, it's all there. And they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. They've got so many more than that, that's just a couple to name a few. I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste just like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. That's a big word for those of us that don't pay that much attention to healthy stuff. And it's even better is that they are healthy. Only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about how ordering your Built bars at Built.com, but now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today. Walk to the pharmacy section and grab yourself a box of Built bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. You know how much I like the puffs, guys. You got to get a puff. Plus, if you're close to Sam's Club, you can go get yourself a big 13-bar box because, big box store with our hit flavors like brownie batter and churro. You can thank me later. That's Built, and check it out at Sam's and at Walmart. Coming up next week, we will keep you apprised of all the latest rumors and look ahead at what the opening day lineup could be. We kind of mentioned that here just a brief bit, but when it comes to this opening day lineup, it's going to be something that we talk about all throughout spring training. So you can believe that this won't be the last time we mention that. All right, Steve.
And I think we might have a drop-in visitor next week too. Don't have it confirmed enough to tease a name yet, but somebody might swing by and talk to us next week, I think.
Somebody who might wear a Hawaiian shirt if we invite him on a Aloha.
As I know for a fact he would wear a Hawaiian shirt if I ask him to.
Yeah,
we'll see. He's working on his schedule for me, but stick around next week, folks. We might have some fun conversation coming up.
As the professionals say, stay tuned. Steve, we've been talking a lot about rumors when it comes to a former Red coming to Cincinnati again, and that's Johnny Cueto. Johnny Cueto has listed the Cincinnati Reds as a finalist. 3 finalists for his services in 2023. Now, we talked a little bit about it on yesterday's pod where, we'd be a little bit surprised if he did come here, but the value is clear. Dude pitched amazingly last season, and it would the presence of Johnny Cueto would bolster the Reds pitching staff, the Reds rotation, to a point that they could possibly consider a strategy that you and I have talked about a bit for the last year or so that we would love to see.
Oh, with Johnny in house, we could go back to talking about the 6-man rotation. And I know you're probably already scratching your head, but the comments are going to blow up. A 6-man rotation. We've been struggling to figure out who the 5 were going to be, right? But hear me out on this. I mean, we already know that with the 6-man rotation, I have called for Nick Lodolo to be the opening day starter. So let's just pencil him in because I'm right about this. Nick Lodolo, number 1. Immediately behind him, Hunter Green. And okay, you know what? Fine, Jeff. We're going to do this right now because if you want to put Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo's rookie season campaign side by side, there is no way with a straight face you can tell me that Hunter Green outpitched Nick Lodolo and deserves to be the number 1 starter.
We have the better K per 9.
Oh, stop it. It doesn't matter who gave up more home runs. Come on. It's you can't do it. It's Nick Lodolo and then Hunter Green. I think at number 3, you keep this trio of young pitchers together and you go with Graham Ashcraft. Now, there is an argument that you put Johnny Cueto in that 3 spot. So you have the 2 rookies and then Cueto, and then you drop in with another batch of rookies behind him or young pitchers behind him, which would then be Ashcraft. But I like keeping it Lodolo, Green, Ashcraft. Then you go with Cueto. Then now you get to the 5th spot. And I think, here's my hot take of the day. I've been thinking about this, and I think that Williamson's going to show up ready to pitch from day 1 on spring training. And I think he's going to go out there and take that number 5 spot, because the writing was already on the wall at the end of last season. And if he hasn't been busting his butt every day this offseason to get ready to go out there and take that job, then I don't know what to tell you. It just means he didn't want it, because the writing has been there that the spot was going to be there for him. He just needed to go take it. So that's your number 5 guy. Now the number 6 guy. Here's where it gets interesting, because you don't necessarily have to say we're using a 6-man rotation. We're using a 6-man rotation all season long, and that's just the way it's going to be. You can start that way. You can slide guys in and out of that 6th spot in the rotation. You can get guys like Stout some starts in the 6th spot. You could get Abbott some starts in the 6th spot, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the same guy all season long. If somebody in another slot in the rotation is tired or has a little bit of a nagging injury, you can skip them and use a 5-man rotation format, keeping everybody healthy, keeping everybody rested, not running the risk of having to play the ridiculous, suddenly he's a little injured in September, we're going to have to shut him down for a minute, stuff that none of us believed. Nobody believed that. Those pitchers were tired. They weren't hurt.
Right.
It's just the way that it was. So this to me solves a lot of problems and allows them to really, I don't want to say baby Jeff, but it really allows them to protect these young arms.
Yeah, that's the most important part of this. It's not that we want them to force a guy, and the important thing is going to be ready the important thing is going to be, is Stout ready? Is Abbott ready? Is Connor Overton healthy and ready to go? Who is the 6th man, and is he ready? Because if they do have 6 guys, the value of this is taking pressure off the top, taking pressure off of Lodolo, taking pressure off of Green, taking pressure off Ashcraft, taking pressure off of Johnny Cueto. Should Johnny Cueto be here? Because we mentioned at the top of this offseason that if you're looking at goals for the offseason, they've really nailed them with Tyler Stevenson. They really did a great job of bringing in a reliable outfield bat. And we did also think that, hey, they could benefit quite a bit from bringing in a veteran presence for the rotation, because the rotation is very young and is very shallow. And that veteran presence would help that deepen. But you bring this all in and you add to the rest, because the game of baseball nowadays is not, let's force our guys to throw 300 innings in a year. Sure, if they're good enough to, and if they're healthy enough to, whatever, let them go do that. But if you can limit it to 140, 150 innings a year, and you're talking about, down the road, you don't have these guys whose arms are falling off. Like, there's a little bit of a long game that they can play with a 6-man rotation. So I would love to see this ability. But even if they don't get the 6-man rotation, you take pressure off of who's going to be the 5th man, because then you just go with the hot hand. If Brandon Williamson has got a couple of good starts in him, good on him. Let him go. If he starts to struggle a little bit, all right, let's see what Levi Stout's got. Let's see what Connor Overton has. Let's see what Andrew Abbott has. There's options here. And then probably they're going to pick up 1 or 2 guys off of waivers throughout spring training, and maybe they stick around for a little bit too. So I think that Johnny Cueto's value to this team is worth whatever they would have to pay. Like, I don't think we're talking about a guy who's going to be making 18, 19, $20 million. Probably 13 or 14 is more what they are looking at to have to sign him.
You talk about them still going out there and signing a few guys. I can't wait for the emergency podcast when they sign Jeff Hoffman. I can't wait. I know you've got the jersey pressed and hanging just off camera there. I know exactly where it is in your office. I can't wait for that. But no, your point's well taken on the moves that they've made. I mean, you and I basically listed 4 things at the end of last season that we thought absolutely had to happen for this team to be solidly moving forward. Neither of us have ever said this is what they're going to do to be a playoff contender. I think they could stumble their way into relevance by doing these four things. The first one was go out and get that outfielder in a Tommy Pham like signing. And that's what they did with Will Myers. Very, very similar the way that whole thing shook out, the way that whole deal shook out, and that player's impact on the lineup. Very similar. Second thing that we said they needed to do was overhaul the catching position, which they did. They did both of those things, and I think they did it effectively. We said they need to get a starting pitcher. We said they need to fix the bullpen. We're still kind of waiting to see where all of those shoes fall in this thing. But for me, Johnny Cueto is also a game changer, and I've said this a few times, but I think it's worth repeating just a little bit, that from a front office standpoint, it's the signing that lets them hold the press conference. The Will Myers signing didn't let them hold a press conference. Nobody was getting ready to plan a parade for Curt Casali. As good as he was while he was here, it didn't really move the needle in that way. If they signed Johnny Cueto, they could have the press conference down at the ballpark. They can make a big deal out of it. You know, probably Phil Castellini's handing him I'm sorry, that's SOB, son of Bob. Phil Castellini is handing the jersey over and having the photo up. Probably not allowed to talk at that press conference, but at least holding the jersey and handing it over. It gives them that PR moment in the offseason because it's a player that's loved. It's a player that the casual fan would be excited about. It's a player that everybody would recognize. So I know I'm probably overvaluing that component, but I think that matters. I think that the Castellini ownership group and Nick Krall would love to have some type of moment this offseason to have that press conference.
And you have something to point to. You're right, because we're going to go through another offseason, assuming they don't sign Johnny Cueto, where there's still lots of questions from most of the fan base, where they're just like, what is the direction here? And while people are questioning the Reds, they're watching the Bengals just go nuts and have playoff runs and have lots of success. So there's going to be, again, this dichotomy of just like how far apart are these two teams and how much are these two fan bases just completely on different levels right now. And they have to notice that. There's no way that the ownership group for the Cincinnati Reds is sitting by and not seeing what the Bengals are doing. Now, does Johnny Cueto, again, we're saying this so very poignantly, Johnny Cueto doesn't make them a playoff team. Will Myers doesn't make them a playoff team. Curt Casali, Luke Maile, the trade for Nick Solak doesn't make them a playoff team. The things that will make this team a playoff team are not going to happen this year. They're probably going to happen over the course of the next 2 years. So there's no microwave scenario here. There's no quick option to just fix everything and boom, the Reds are there. But there are some things that help move that baseline up a little bit. And Johnny Cueto is a huge move the baseline up a little bit, because you also bring in a mentor. And we haven't mentioned this when it comes to the pitching staff. You bring in a mentor for all these young guys that a pitcher that they can lean on, a pitcher that they can talk to, a pitcher that can help them out through maybe a struggle of a start. Like, how do they understand what just happens when they, Hunter Green's start in Milwaukee when he gives up 5 home runs? You can go back and talk to Johnny, and Johnny's like, oh, well, sit down. I got a story to tell you, regale you with. I don't know why I think he's like a sailor, but yeah.
He's not Papa in a rocking chair. What are you talking about?
Freaking Popeye going on over here. Yeah, that's weird.
Oh my God.
But
Jeff.
no, that would be a really big get for so many different reasons. And I think it would be a day and probably a check mark on this off season where we can just go, boom, let's go, bring on pitchers and catchers reporting. We're ready.
I agree. And we have now reached my favorite part of the live Aloha Fridays, Jeff. We're going to start digging into questions and comments, but let's do this. Jeff, why don't you take us through this next break real quick and let me get set up on the comment section over here while you're talking, and then we will move forward with questions and comments.
Yeah, definitely. Coming up here, we do have quite a few to get into. We got some active chatters here in the YouTube chat that we're going to have a couple of questions for our audio audience. But again, we are live here on YouTube. If you're listening on your favorite audio platform, make sure you join us 1:30 p.m. on Fridays throughout the off season for our live Aloha editions of the pod. So we got some questions and comments coming up here in just a moment. But before we get into that, I wanted to let you know you can follow the show on YouTube. If this is your first time, thank you. And click that bell to get notified. You can also follow us on Twitter in between episodes. You can follow me at Jeff Carr with 3 Fs. You can follow Steve at S. Offenbaker with 2 Fs. And you can follow the show as well at Locked On Reds. We have things that we talk about on Twitter in between episodes, whether it be the Reds, the Bengals, different things that are happening. You know, we just like to keep it real, and we'll keep it chill too. We're not going to overload your feed or anything like that. But also, Steve, too, I think that it's interesting to note with all of the questions about the Reds swirling around. I've noticed that people have stopped mentioning how optimistic I've been. So I'll just remind them the Reds are going to win 75 or more games this year. And I hope everybody enjoys that.
I love that you remain dedicated to putting vodka in that Stormtrooper mug every morning before we do this.
It's coffee. I promise it's coffee.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's get into this. Let's dig into a couple comments. Some of these are in response to what we've been talking about, starting with Joey. Calvin says he guesses Joey should work the crowds if he's not ready on opening day. The Reds need all the help they can get to get fans to see live ball games. Hey, this is true. You know, this is actually a good point. If Joey's not ready on opening day, I think that he should just be like wandering the ballpark and doing some of the things he did last season while he was injured. I mean, Calvin's right. It would bring people down to the yard. If you knew that, you know, every game Joey was going to be wandering around between the 3rd and the 7th innings or whatever, I mean, I would definitely make sure I got down there for that.
I would be interested to see, especially if it's like a cold opening day. I'd be like, all right, what's the one, the Goose, Canada Goose? Which Canadian Goose jacket's Joey wearing? Because you know it's Canadian Goose.
Seth Pryor checks in, and Seth got me. I'm gonna tell you, Jeff. I told you this off air, and I'll stroke Seth's ego just a little bit because he got me in the YouTube comments yesterday, and I was ready to fight. I was ready to sit down and write like a 7-paragraph response, and I talked myself out of it because Seth was basically, you know, on me about my take on moving Jonathan India to the outfield and, you know, telling me, you know, India just won Rookie of the Year and all this stuff. And Seth's right. India did just win Rookie of the Year, but his defense was bad then too. He's not a great second baseman. So if we can improve defense at second base, find India a home still in the starting lineup on a corner outfield spot and a designated hitter, the team's better. The Reds are better. We get to see more wins. We get to see more quality baseball. It's, you know, just because the guy won an award playing a position average doesn't mean he gets to continue to play at the position. All that being said, Seth checks in and says if Votto is ready, then the infield basically should be India, Barrero, Steer, Stevenson, and Votto. And that's probably what it'll be if the Reds don't get a little cutting edge. That's probably, if Votto's healthy, that's probably what the infield looks like, Jeff.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree there. But, and I also think to the point about moving India and why are we thinking that a percentage of that idea also comes from the fact that the Reds talent coming up through the farm system is wholly like infield focused. Like there are a couple of outfielders, but they're far away. They're not ready this year. And there are some questions about whether they will ever be ready. So you've got a guy who, you know, can hit, maybe you probably could play left field. All right. I think it would make sense to at least try it out. I don't know that the Reds are going to necessarily do that, but if they do that, they've got some guys that can move over into the second base spot very easily.
Would you be upset with an opening day outfield of India, India, Matt McCain, and Myers?
Oh yeah, no. I don't know. I don't see a scenario where Jake Fraley's not in the opening day lineup this year. Like, well, I don't know that Matt McClain.
I'm talking about a platoon. I'm talking about a platoon.
Okay, well, yeah, if it's a lefty pitcher, sure, yeah.
So I got no problem with India out there. The more I think about it, the more I just listen. Nick, we know you're listening. Nick Crawl, Nick, India to the outfield. I'm telling you, it's a way to go. This is becoming quickly, Jeff, one of my favorite YouTube commenters, and that is Poofy Haired Fancy Boy. And he's got some stuff in the chat that I'm not putting up on the screen and talking about, but this one I will for just a minute. Thinks I should grow the Joey Votto-esque beard. I would be all, no, it wouldn't take me very long. I would be all in on that, except for the fact that I have to be able to get an N95 to seal on my face at work, and it won't do it. So that's this is as big as it can go and still seal that mask. So that's why Joey Votto beard.
Joey's Reds Fest beard looks like he just came out. You ever remember the movie Shooter? And like he's like way out in the wilderness of Alaska, and he's got like all of the beard and stuff like that, but he's been there for years. Like it just looks like Joey somehow spent 5 years growing that beard, and then he shows up at Reds Fest, and then he shows up spring training completely shaved. Like I don't. He must be the king of beard growers, and he just doesn't have one during the season.
Seth also checked in talking about he had a shoulder injury. This is when we were talking about Votto's recovery. It is extremely hard, Seth. I agree with you that I when I did my rotator cuff rehab, like, I have seen the people that don't take the rehab seriously and can't lift their arm above shoulder level. Like they can only get it about to here. And I was not going to be one of those people. So I attacked rehab. And from what I've seen from Votto, he is attacking rehab. So I think he's going to get there. I really do think he's going to be there. I just hope that he has set reasonable expectations in his head for what post-surgery life is going to look like with that shoulder. Ronnie Snyder checks in. He says that he's happy that the awful shift is going to be gone forever. Better baseball ahead. We haven't really spent a whole lot of time talking about this, Jeff, but the impacts of the banning of the shift. Do you think it's going to be a big deal? Do you think it's not going to be a big deal? How do you see this playing out?
I don't necessarily know that it's going to be that huge of a deal. Like I feel like you always hear the take of like, man, Joey or insert left-handed batter here is going to hit 300 without the shift. And I mean, Joey, that might be true, but there's some guys that we'll see a little bit of an improvement for, but overall, I don't think a lot of hitters' approaches are going to change. Like, I don't think you're just going to see, because like the one that I always think about is Joey Gallo. Joey Gallo was a straight pool hitter. And every team that faced him would put all 8 guys on the pool side and dare him to do anything else. And he still tried to be a straight pool hitter. Like there's some guys who just, for whatever reason, have it in their mind that I'm going to hit this way. I think it's an ego thing mostly, but I'm just going to hit and you're not going to catch it. And then there's 8 guys that are ready to catch it. So I think that overall we're going to see a little bit of a change, but I don't necessarily know that we're going to see the drastic flip in the sport that everybody is expecting.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think it will improve batting averages slightly. I think numbers will be up a little bit. I think teams are going to get creative defensively within the letter of the rule, because basically all of these limitations on the shift are in place until the pitcher starts his windup. And there are some defenders. I don't know that the Reds have any of them, but there are some defenders that are quick enough to make some adjustments while the pitcher is in his windup. And if you're committed enough to the idea that a player is going to hit the ball to the right side of the infield, let's say you've got a left-hander up there. If you are committed enough to that idea that this guy is going to pull the ball, as soon as the pitcher starts his windup, you can have like a windmill on. I mean, guys can move at that point. So I think teams will do that. I think you'll see where the infielder, second baseman's got his toes in the dirt, and as soon as that windup starts, drops straight back into that short right field position. And at the same time, whoever is playing shortstop is exactly as close to second base as they can be and still be legal. And then as soon as that windup starts, runs over and fills that hole that's created by the second baseman dropping back, and then the third baseman scooting towards shortstop. I recall like teams doing this back in like, travel ball days and high school days, like a windmill play where the whole infield's moving when the pitcher goes, so that you don't show your hand so much. So I could see them doing that.
I think the other thing that the shift rule that they now have did not stipulate is the outfield positioning. There might be some teams that pull their right fielder into where they had the second baseman or third baseman or whatever playing shallow right field, and they might shade the center fielder over to right center so as to still load up on the pool side and dare the left-handed hitter to either hit it right up the middle or, still push it, because you'll still see the shortstop be as close to second base as possible. I agree with you. And I still think there's going to be some form of shifting available. So I don't necessarily think that we're talking about, Stratomatic. It's straight up. You got your first base in the first base hole, second base, so
yeah,
on
we're
and so
not
forth.
going back to the 70s on defensive placement. That's not what's going to happen.
Strategy. We'll figure out a way.
This is what I know. If it makes hashtag Manfred hates baseball upset, I like it. So I hope teams get creative. That's for sure. Hey, Ronnie makes another great point. Jeff, Ronnie says, don't forget about the coming of Ellie. The young man will change the hitting order. This in regards to where we were going to bat guys. That's true. We didn't take that into account when we talked about this, Jeff. If some strangeness happens where Ellie is on this team opening day, it completely changes how you construct this lineup.
100%.
I don't know that. I mean, a lot of times we see guys come up and they're automatically 7, 8, 9 hitters in the lineup. I don't think that's what they do with Ellie De La Cruz when he comes up, no matter how he's performing. Even if he does have that struggle at the beginning, I don't see them putting him at the bottom of the lineup.
I think if everybody's healthy, he bats second.
Right. He's got some wheels too. I mean, that's true. But man,
I think you got India,
him and Stevenson
Ellie.
at 3 and 4 is
Yeah. But even with Joey, I still think, and I'm married to this idea that Joey's just going to go crazy this year, but I think you got India, you got Ellie, you got Votto, you got Stevenson, you got Will Myers. I think that's your top 5. Should Ellie De La Cruz come up and immediately be as good as we think he can?
Seth's on fire today. Jose Barrero will bat second if he earns the shortstop position. Not a chance. I don't.
I'll just be happy if he doesn't bat last.
He's just gonna be happy to be on the field. I
think that a Barrero that figures out hitting could be valuable as that, how we always say, oh, you bat the fast but not necessarily great hitter number 9, so you kind of have 2 leadoff spots whenever you turn the lineup over. I think I could see him batting number
9. Yeah,
but I just don't know that he's a strategic player. You're not going to go into the game saying we got Jose Barrero in the lineup. That's just not going to be a thing.
I mean, I feel like we spend a lot of time, and Carlos loves to get on us about this a little bit. I feel like we spend a lot of time sounding really down and negative about Jose Barrero. And I want Jose Barrero to work out, but he hasn't shown us anything at the major league level to make me say he can show up and be a top of the lineup kind of guy. And there's no chance that he can change my mind in spring training this year, no matter how he looks.
Let's put it this way. If Jose Barrero he's hitting good enough to bat second, the Reds are much closer to 500 than everybody thinks they will be. Because if he is panning out that well, this team is just way better than we think.
That's true. What I'm saying is there's not enough time in Goodyear in the month of March for Jose Barrero to cement himself as the number 2 hitter in this lineup. And even if, even if he goes to Goodyear and hits 600, it's Goodyear. He's facing pitchers that are going to be pitching in Daytona. You can't I can't do it. It's just getting me worked up.
I definitely agree with Air, but what I'm saying is the upside of that is the Reds are doing so much better if Jose Barrero is doing that much better. I think that as he moves, he's not the most important player on the team, but he could be the most impactful player on the team, because if he is batting that well, Ellie De La Cruz is playing third base, Spencer Steer is your super utility. Those 2 things happen a year ahead of time, and it's just going to be absolutely phenomenal that the roster will fall into place behind that. But I'm with you. I think that is the 0.1 percentile of outcomes when it comes to Jose Barrero, and that is where we will drop off the audio side of things. Thanks, everybody, for checking us out on the audio version. If you're watching here live on YouTube, stay right there. We're going to continue talking Reds baseball with you here in the comments section. But if you're on the audio side of things, thanks so much for listening to us. Make sure you check out our live edition of the Locked On Reds podcast every Friday at 1:30. Steve, take us away.
All right. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. I don't have my sheet in front of me. You caught me completely off guard, Jeff. Thanks a lot. Let me scroll. Thanks for making Locked On Reds your first listen. Now make your second listen, the Locked On MLB Prospects podcast with host Lindsey Crosby. Lindsey is a prospect encyclopedia. He goes deep into the Major League Baseball stats. He goes deep into the coverage of the minor leagues, and he will tell you about all of the Major League Baseball stars of tomorrow today. And I really do think that that's a Disney thing. I'm going to remember it. It pulls at me every time I say it. Just like the Locked On Reds podcast, the Locked On MLB Prospects podcast is free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We will continue to be right here, scouring the transactions, listening in on the rumors, and keeping you Locked On Reds every single day. All right. Now that I completely butchered that transition, let's jump back into the questions and comments, Jeffrey. Debbie Brown is in the feeds today. We like Debbie. There's a little typo in here. I will correct it on reading. She says she watched an interview with Nick Krall on YouTube, and Nick Krall said that Tyler Stevenson wasn't going to catch every day, that they wanted to save his knees. Yeah, Jeff and I have been kind of talking about this, and we haven't. We probably need to just do a whole episode, Jeff, on the overhaul of the catcher position and all of the ways why we think it's better, not just, a segment here and there. But that being said, the Reds have truly gone in on making the catcher group, and nobody has come up with a good name for that collection of people yet. But they truly have gone all in on creating a situation where Tyler can move around a bit. When he was here, when we talked to him, and if you didn't see that interview, make sure you jump back into the archives and listen to our conversation with Tyler Stevenson. He said he wants to catch 120 games. That's the number. That's where he feels he can catch and be healthy and it not wear down his legs and not have a negative impact on his offense. That's the question I ask him. How many games can you catch and it not have a negative impact on your hitting and your legs? He said 120. That still leaves, 40 games. And I don't think they're going to let him catch 120. I think if he catches somewhere between 90 and 100 games, Kurt Casale is going to get the rest of the heavy lifting behind the plate. You've got Miley. You've got that guy, Miley. You see, I've messed with it so much, Jeff. That say it right. I know. But here's the thing: I played with the name so much now that I don't remember which one's correct. So it's just that guy. That guy's also going to be on the team. They're going to carry 3 catchers, and to carry 3 catchers, it's because they fully expect Tyler Stevenson to be playing a lot of other places. So yes. I think 90 to 100 games for Tyler Stevenson. I think Kurt Casale carries the bulk of the rest of it behind the plate, and then you've got Miley as your guy that can come in late inning swaps, can come in, catch a day game after a night game. You've got him to fill that role. And on paper, they've got to go out and perform, but on paper, the catching group for offensive production is in much better shape than it was last season, where I think you and I could have probably put up the same numbers that some of the guys that caught for this team did.
No, I firmly agree with you there, but this is what this interview tells me. And there's been multiple quotes that have told me this as well, but we like to joke. But I think it's real. I think Nick Krall listens to us because we've been saying this since the season ended. We've been saying this since Tyler Stevenson got hurt, that they need to bring him help. They need to bring depth to the catching position, and they need to find other opportunities for him to get his bat in the lineup, but to move him out from behind the plate. Nick Krall is basically saying exactly what we have been saying for the last 6 months.
This is true. And listen, what we learned at Reds Fest is that Phil Castellini knows who we are. So And Phil Castellini knows who Scott Campbell is now, too, by the way.
I think he like saw you. He looked at you and he did a double take. Because like when he looked at us, he did a double take. But I kind of noticed his eyes were off center where I was looking.
He glared at me.
I think he was looking.
He glared at me. Like I think if he doesn't listen, someone told him about the SOB bit. I guarantee you. The look that I got from that man was a person that knew I had been talking smack about him. So
yeah.
And then you know, Ken was with us, our buddy Obscure X Reds was also with us, and I'm like, did you see that? And it wasn't just me imagining it. Everybody was like, yeah, we saw that. So,
but no, like regardless,
so
like
shout out to Phil. Hey Phil, thanks for listening, Phil.
Regardless, this is just another like love what Nick Kroll has done this offseason. Just a beautiful understanding of what he needed to do with this roster.
Calvin says, do we think the Reds could go to a platoon, basically, is what he's asking here. Could they split at bats based on right-handed, left-handed pitchers at first base if Joey struggles? You know, we've talked about that eventually. He brings
up a good
Time,
point. Yeah,
it is. Father Time's eventually going to catch up with Joey Votto, and they're going to have to play the splits. If they weren't changing. Right now, well, I thought this was going to be the year. Looking at the trajectory, I thought 2023 would probably be about the time they would have to really seriously consider platooning Joey Votto at first base. The whole shift thing gives me a little bit of pause just to see how Joey Votto works on defeating it. You know, we just said we don't think it's going to be a big game changer as far as Major League Baseball as a whole, but you know, I think Joey Votto might be one of the guys that finds a way to take advantage of it. So I think the answer to this in my mind, Calvin, is it depends. It depends on how Joey does with that adjustment. But yes, point well taken. There's going to come a day here pretty quick where they got a platoon first base.
Calvin brings up a really good point because we talk about how Joey Votto is trying to fight back against Father Time. You know, he gets the power numbers back. He's still pretty good with his eye at the plate and different things like that. But the one thing that he has not fixed, and I don't think he will, is his numbers against left-handed pitching have just gone down the drain. He is very bad against left-handed pitching. He is on base numbers really aren't even that good. He doesn't draw that many walks. He does strike out a lot more at this point in his career. So I think he's definitely got a point. And the beautiful thing is Tyler Stevenson is right-handed and mashes left-handed pitching. I don't think it would be a straight platoon there. You'd be working other right-handed hitters in. Spencer Steer, depending on if there's somebody that can play third base, Spencer Steer might move over to first for a little bit. Up midway, you know, maybe June, July-ish or whatever, maybe we see Christian Encarnacion Strand come up and then he gets some time at first base to kind of platoon a little bit with Joey. But I do think that there is some merit where in years past, I would say, no, Joey can hit anything. He's fine. He's going to be all right. Now I look at the numbers and there's a big enough sample size to corroborate the fact that Joey just doesn't hit left-handed pitching anymore.
And when you say not a straight platoon, you can straight platoon Votto, but the right-handed partner is not a straight platoon. I get what you're saying. Right. That you're going to change. You're going to interchange the right-handed partner. I got you. Yes. Seth weighs in on Johnny Cueto. He thinks Johnny's not signing with the Reds. He thinks that it would go against what Nick Kroll has said and that it doesn't fit the model that the Reds have committed to. He thinks the bullpen needs help. Those are great points. It doesn't fit with the model. It does go against what Nick Kroll has said about the money. He said, and really, I mean, what Nick said is they would have to get creative. So, I mean, that means he left himself an out if they do go do something. It doesn't fit the model. That part is absolutely correct, Seth. It doesn't fit the model of building through the youth, but the Reds need a starter. They need somebody else to kind of fill out this rotation. So in that regard, as long as it's not a 3-year deal, if it's a 1-year deal, a Band-Aid signing, that fits the model. That still allows you to bring guys up and do things, but you're not trading away prospects. You're not committing to a guy for multiple years, taking away resources. It's a Band-Aid PR move. So in that regard, the bullpen needs help. My God, does the bullpen need help? But I mean, they need help in that there's no guarantees out there. As you know, Jeff and I, as you and I discussed, if there's a lot of ifs. And if a majority of those ifs are the guys we think they're going to be, the bullpen's not as bad as it was last year. But there's a lot of what if going on out there in the bullpen.
I kind of think that's why, and this is where, you know, we there's different areas of this team where we give Nick Kroll credit because there was a plan, because he put a nice strategy in place. And then there's other areas of this team that they still kind of seem like they're going on hope. And I feel like the bullpen is still a hope area. They're still hoping that a lot of those hurt guys that we didn't see very much last year come back. And then they will, do one of those things where they say, well, see, it was basically like we did go acquire a veteran bullpen arm, because I think they would have done it by now if they weren't doing that. Because you see guys like Brad Boxberger. I think Brad Boxberger signed for like $3 million a year, and Boxberger's a pretty decent relief pitcher. And I thought maybe that would be a guy that the Reds would kind of kick the tires on. And if you're telling me the Reds aren't going to spend $3 million on a reliever, then they're just not going to sign a reliever. So I wonder if we see a major league signing for the bullpen, because they're leaning on hope for that to be a strategy. But you said it right with the model. Like 1-year deals are all they're looking at right now. I don't think he's going to upset the model at all with that.
In regards to bullpen help, where I see it coming from is during spring training cuts. I could see them going out and finding somebody that gets let go from another organization, bring them in on a minor league invite, incentive laden major league deal. And if they come and pitch good and make the team, they'll get paid, and they can get paid if they perform well. I think those are Nick talked about being creative. That's creative. That's how you get guys in that, you may end up still paying them the $3 million, but they're by God going to earn the $3 million because you're going to put them on incentive contracts after they got cut by somebody else. I could see that working. I don't think, and listen, I don't think that's a bad plan. We're talking about a team in 2023 that's still not quite ready for prime time. They can stumble into relevancy. I agree with that. I agree that they could win 65 to 70 games max, and that they could be in the conversation for, the final wild card spot in September, but they're not going to make the playoffs. They're not going to win 75 games. It would be a creative way for Nick Kroll to move and shake and get things done.
Yes. Let's see. Yes. Heath Hembry is available. So,
oh my God.
Let's see.
It's Jeff Hoffman. That's who they're signing. I have the emergency episode planned for you. Don't you worry. Seth agrees with me for once. He says, by the way, I agree with Steve for once. Thanks, Seth. Lodolo is the opening day starter. Hunter Green, ace number 2. I do like that one.
Yeah. I still think that Hunter Green's the more marketable of the two, but I would agree at this point in their career, I think Lodolo is ahead of Green. I still think Green has far more upside than Nick Lodolo has. Not to say Nick Lodolo doesn't have high upside. I think they both have high upside. It's just Green's is the frickin' universe, like way out there.
Let me say, I appreciate these guys in the comments. Seth's given me a lot of gas today, and that's fine because I poked at him. So I absolutely deserve it. But, I love the guys in the comments that you can tell are just like dedicated everyday listeners that know our running bits and know the guys that drive me crazy. And so, Seth, I'm going to put this up because it's the guy that hits me every time that my all-time favorite Red is Taylor Motter. You know what? I wonder if Ken has a Motter jersey. If he does, I'm going to borrow it. I'm going to wear it at Great American Ballpark next season.
Would not be surprised. I don't know. I do kind of want to address some of these comments. I just kind of,
yeah, if you find some that I've skipped, there's some that I just absolutely can't get into. Poofy haired fancy boy is the leader in that category. But I'll do this one from Poofy haired. They could have Cueto ride in on a horse. Talk about an entrance, right? Just have him come trotting out there on the white stallion and jump off on the mound. I could see that being a.
I think I really do like this one. It's kind of tough, the unknown player that's going to step up for us. I don't necessarily know that you would call him unknown. I think you would probably either say he's a prospect that is not like on the team's top 30, or maybe one of the outfielders, one of the F troop that we're not necessarily considering right now. Like maybe it's Fairchild or Friedel that bumps up. I don't necessarily know that we're going to have anybody surprise us, though, if that makes sense. I think we're coming into the point of the Reds hopefully flash rebuild, really quick rebuild, where we know who the big contributors are going to be, and the surprise will be when they don't pay off. I think that probably the biggest surprise out of anything, and we're setting this up this way, and I hope that we are both wrong in our expectations. We continue to say we hope we're both wrong, but I think the biggest surprise would be if Jose Barrero would be a big contributor on this lineup. That would be ours.
I don't know if it's unknown player, but I'm going to say that one of these young guys is going to shock us that we don't think is quite ready and is going to suddenly be ready and be the man. And I think that's going to be Matt McLain. I think that he's going to have a great spring, great start of the season. I think he's going to join the big league club, and I think he's going to play outfield. That's my hot take of the younger unknown type players. That's what's going to happen. That's my guess.
But also credit to the Reds too for really putting the prospects in the spotlight. Like, it's really hard to talk about a specific prospect. Like, definitely Ellie De La Cruz isn't going to come out of nowhere because he has been, hyped up and we have lifted him up and said, this is the guy. And even if you were to say Christian Encarnacion Strand, I think there's plenty of people that know, CES, people understand this dude's got power. So he's not going to surprise anybody when he comes up and he hits a bomb and maybe even, smashes the window out of the tundra. So I think that it's hard to say who the unknown would be. I think TJ Friedel was the closest to that last year, but even then you could kind of skew his numbers to say that he was just okay. He wasn't like amazing.
Jeff, these next two comments kind of go hand in hand, so I'm going to do both comments and then we'll talk about it. So Lotems checks in with a reality check and says that Johnny Cueto can sign with a playoff contender. He's not coming to the Reds. And then the quirky picker Chad checks in and says, I know the Reds would want Johnny Cueto, but why would Johnny Cueto want the Reds? That's a fair point. When we talked about this, was it yesterday or day before, Jeff, one of the things that I mentioned was that the Reds are usually really good about not leaking information. And so I don't think that Ken Rosenthal got his stuff by talking directly to the Reds front office about Johnny Cueto. I think that came from Johnny Cueto's representation. I think they're the ones that said the Reds. So probably what the truth of this is, folks, is that it's San Diego's deal to seal. Miami's in the mix, probably upping the money a little bit. And the representation is also dropping the Reds in the conversation just to motivate the other two. That is probably what's going on. But all of the points we're making about Johnny Cueto are valid from a Cincinnati Reds standpoint. You're absolutely right. Why would Johnny want to come here? It would be a nostalgia factor. It would be a coming home again. It would be bookending his career to finish where he got big. And it would be a hat tip to the city. Him coming to Cincinnati would be nothing more than him showing love to the people and the fans of Cincinnati. Because as we hear time and time again, players that come to Cincinnati want to be in Cincinnati. They like it here. They like the atmosphere. They like the way they're treated by the fans in Cincinnati. And that matters. I think at the end of the day, when you've made as much money as Johnny Cueto has made, if it's a difference between $1 million here and $1 million there, and you can be happy and you can be in a place where people love you, maybe that wins.
And I think that you're dead on with what I would say is the reason why Johnny Cueto would want to come here. He would want to come here to retire a Red. I don't think he's coming here with the idea that, if you get hot, we're going to trade you in July. He's coming here and he's signing a deal that says, this is it for me. This is my last spot on my career. The other part of this is Johnny does have a World Series ring. Now, that's not to say that any player is content with only getting one, and he probably wants to get another one, but it's not to say that it's like I must find myself a World Series ring. He's got that for his career. So I don't necessarily think the just absolute feral hunger for a ring that some players get later on in their career is there with Johnny, and he's going to chase that at all costs. But I do kind of agree with Lotems that it's like, if he's going to compete somewhere, he's probably leaning toward that spot. And we said this yesterday when we talked about him listing the Reds as a finalist. I think if you're picking from those three teams, you're going to the Padres.
And Jeff, I mean, we can relate this back to everyday real life too. And I'll use myself as an example. I could go a lot of other places and make more money than I make in my everyday day gig. But I choose to make a little bit less and see the beach out that window over there.
Be where you want.
So,
Be where you
you
want.
know, it's sometimes you just got to be where you're happy is what I'm
Yeah.
saying. And you make choices based on that. So, I mean, I could see it happening. I could see it happening. This next one, listen, you know, Jeff and I try not to get into a lot of controversy on this show unless it forces its way in. And there is a topic that I have avoided and I've kind of just scrolled past in the comments, but let's do it today, Jeff, because I let's spend a little bit of time on it and then maybe not talk about it ever again. Dan Edwards checks in and asks, if the Dodgers release Trevor Bauer, would the Reds go get him? Would they trade for him? Would they sign him? You know, as you all probably know, the arbitrator ruled that Trevor has served his time as far as Major League Baseball is concerned. Now, I'm not going to rehash the things that he is accused of and the accusations that were made against him. If you want to know about that, go Google it, go read up on it. I'm not talking about those shady details. I will say this. Trevor Bauer is eligible to pitch in the major leagues. I don't think the Reds would go anywhere near him with a 50-foot pull. I can't imagine why, given what we saw with the Cleveland Browns and the fallout from signing Deshaun Watson, why anybody would be willing to go out and take that on. It's a PR nightmare. And for a team that has suffered so many PR nightmares over the course of the last couple years, I can't see the Reds doing anything that could even remotely come close to alienating the fan base the way that this signing would. There would be people that would be okay with this signing, and there would be, especially if he comes and pitches and pitches well, there would be people that would be okay with that. I'm not one of them. And I don't think that it's worth the drama, the PR hit, the controversy. And it feels dirty. It feels dirty, and I can't get on board with it.
No, I'm on the same page. I think that Trevor Bauer is a memory for the Reds. His Cy Young award with the Reds will always be a memory that we have. And I think the Reds want to keep him a memory. I don't think we are going to see the Reds wade into those waters. I'm not sure who's going to wade into those waters. That's a lot to deal with. And make no mistake about it, it's not a situation like if the Dodgers release him, somebody's got to go pay him $30 million. He's still going to get that money that he gets. I think that they ruled he still gets the money from that contract. So it's not as if he's going to have to get $30 million, but still, like, it would just be such a distraction for a team that is trying to grow, a team that has a lot of young guys who are trying to figure out what their major league careers look like. And to bring that in, I don't think that would bring whatever you feel about the off the field story with Trevor Bauer. That brings in a huge distraction to Nick Lodolo, a huge distraction to Hunter Green, a huge distraction to every young player that is on this team, and the Reds aren't going to go anywhere near that.
Okay, so we addressed that. We did it. There we go.
There we are.
We'll just post that clip somewhere so that we can just refer people to it, because I don't want to talk about Trevor Bauer anymore. But I mean, we had to at some point. So I appreciate the comment and the question, but I can't see it happening. Here's one we haven't got into. Chad asks, will stolen bases become a thing for the Reds, and who will have the most? This is great because, as you guys know, Major League Baseball has made some rule changes trying to create more of a running game. They are going to crack down on the thing that drives me nuts, which is the shimmy shake relief pitchers that start and stop and zig and zag and pirouette and jump up and down and touch their nose 3 times before they deliver a pitch. That's going away.
Clevenger. Even though he's not a relief pitcher, but Mike Clevenger.
But that they're going to crack down on that. They're going to actually start calling balks, and I'm glad, because it drives me bonkers. I watch games right now, and when they do occasionally call a balk, I'm like, well, that guy's been doing that for the last 3 innings. Why is it a balk now? But
right.
I digress. The other thing that they're doing to help promote the running game is they're making the bases bigger. So you're going to take away a little bit of the deception that the pitchers have been using. You're going to make the bases a little bit closer together and challenge the catchers a little bit more. I think the stolen bases will be up. I think that that's going to maybe not make, we're not going to see a Ricky Henderson type base stealing situation. We might not ever see that again, but we're not going to see that kind of thing. Nobody's going out and stealing 50 bases in a season, 60 bases in a season. There could be a guy that gets 20 or 30 on the Reds, depending on health and ability to get on base. I think Nick Senzel will be a base stealer if he can be healthy and get on base. I think that some of these young guys, as they come up, TJ Friedel's another guy that's fast. It could steal some bases. When Ellie De La Cruz makes the big leagues, I believe stolen bases will be part of his game as well. I've seen him do some things on the base paths in the minor leagues that are really impressive. He's very baseball smart. He knows how to get into the opponent's head. He knows how to put just the right amount of trickery on his running. We've seen him turn triples into inside the park home runs doing that. So I think those guys could be base stealers. I think 20 to 30 is probably a safe number to predict. Do you think any other guys, big time base stealers?
Basically from what I think I could see India, especially a healthy India, getting up there with some steals, not necessarily 20 or 30, but probably 10 or 15. But I agree with you. The Ricky Henderson, the days of touching that were with Billy Hamilton, and that's it. Like, there's nobody that could do that. And Billy Hamilton couldn't get on base enough to do that. So there's got to be a perfect combination of on-base ability and speed. Ellie De La Cruz is going to be a type of dude that I think in a full year could get 40 to 50 steals. He's got that quick twitch first step. He's got an amazing speed, first to second, second to third, something like that. But his stride length is also huge because he's tall. And so he's able to meld speed with just the ability to shorten the distance, shorten the 90 feet for himself. So I think that he could be a huge base stealer, and more than just the rule changes is having a guy that can do it. Like in years past, even when the Reds were good, who are you looking at that was going to steal bases? Like, it was Nick Senzel, and that was it. And just Nick Senzel just never got on base, and he never got on the field most of the time.
And it's
so, yeah.
It's unfortunate the timing, because clearly if the timing had worked out differently, former Red Mike Moustakas would lead the team in stolen bases. I mean, clearly he would. Okay, no, not really.
I smell sarcasm.
Right?
Yeah, no, but Ellie De La Cruz is just going to go off on that, and I can't wait to see it.
Jared on Vinyl says the Reds would move Barrero to the outfield before they would move Ellie to third base. I don't know. I
might be kind of in on this because I was thinking this yesterday or 2 days ago when we were talking about the outfield. It was yesterday or 2 days ago. But whenever we were talking about moving guys to the outfield and we were talking about Barrero, I'm like, you know what? If he hits, would it be more beneficial to move him to center field where the Reds don't have a bona fide dude and put Elliott short and Jose Barrero at center field?
I try to visualize scenarios where Barrero is good enough to be in the lineup every day, so you want to find him a spot. Ellie comes up and takes over the shortstop position, and that means that Barrero's good enough to be in the lineup, but not good enough to fight off Ellie at shortstop. So do you move Barrero to the outfield, or do you move Barrero to third base? I think it all depends on if another prospect establishes himself in the outfield, because it makes no sense to move Barrero to the outfield only to take it away from him again. Say Matt McClain comes up and takes that center field spot, right? So I think it really is like a chessboard right now. You have to be able to look 2 or 3 moves ahead. So somewhere within the organization, they're going to have to make some decisions this year. And I think they've kicked the can down the road for the last couple seasons in making some of these decisions about where guys are going to play. I was happy to see them not wait very long on Noelvi Marte. I thought that was smart to get that decision made early. And I think they just need to say what they're going to do with Matt McClain at this point. Someone needs to look in a camera and say, we're not moving him. He's going to be an infielder. He's going to be our whatever position. We're not moving him, because I keep coming back to the fact that he's already an outfielder, and it would just make so much sense to make him be the guy that moves. And then you're not trying to teach yet another infielder to be an outfielder. The guy is already an outfielder.
But okay, so here's the other thing about that, though. They played Barrero in center field a couple years ago. So he's got major league experience in center field. So if
so does Tyler Stevenson. Are we going to call Tyler Stevenson an outfielder?
He played left field.
Well, but outfield. I mean, what
Left field
qualifies
is
you
totally.
to be
Adam Dunn
an
played left field.
outfielder?
He ain't ever touching center field. No. Like I think that if Barrero is hitting well enough that you keep him in the lineup when you bring up Ellie De La Cruz, there's an argument to be made to move him to center field. Do move Matt McClain to center field. Spend some more time with him there in AAA, and have Jose Barrero be your big league center fielder. So I don't necessarily think that Matt McClain would keep Jose Barrero from moving to center field. In fact, you could still make the argument that does Barrero work out at the plate, and then he possibly works out in center field? Do you move Matt McClain to second and you move India to left? Like, again, like you said, chessboard. There's going to be lots of
Which then would make Spencer Steer either the third baseman or the super utility.
Exactly.
Okay.
And you've got Noelvi Marte in 2 years.
I mean, it's fun. This a team that we're not counting on to be above 500. These are the fun types of conversations to kind of speculate the chessboard and see what we can figure out. Greg Hughes is here, Jeff. Greg Hughes thinks that Johnny Cueto would be a good move, and he also agrees that there will be a surprise in spring, and he thinks it will be Matt McClain. I agree. I think he's going to be on this Reds team this year. I really, really do.
I wonder. And I don't necessarily know that he'll get a huge run like McClain or like Ellie De La Cruz or something like that, but I wonder if we see a big step up from Daniel Veoheen. Daniel Veoheen has had a beautiful winter with the slugging percentage, and he could be a surprise guy. I don't know that he'd be in the major leagues this year, but I think that he takes a step up in in Reds country's collective consciousness of understanding who's next at catcher.
And just as a reminder, Veoheen and Matt Nelson are the two guys of similar age that have kind of been battling out for who's going to establish themselves first as the next up and coming catcher. So far, neither one of them has really grabbed a whole lot of eye-popping attention in their moves through the majors or through the minor league system, rather. Jeff is on board for Veoheen just because he likes saying the name. Matt Nelson has probably had a little more success in the lower levels, but that's an interesting battle to watch, because if ultimately we think Tyler Stevenson is not a catcher for 10 years with the Reds, the next guy needs to kind of start showing who he's going to be here in the next season or so. So those guys, while not having a lot of pressure on them, have a little bit of, all right, guys, it's kind of time to show us something. That's where they're at in their minor league careers right now. Anyway.
Yeah, and neither one is close enough to the majors right now. So I don't necessarily think, and I'm not saying that Veoheen will make the jump to the majors this season, but I think that he is a guy in spring training that could impress us with how he plays.
Ronnie Snyder, piggybacking on some of the things you were talking about, I think Spencer Steer could be special at second base.
Possibly.
Maybe.
But that would mean that Jonathan India's going to move.
I think Spencer, what I think is the biggest piece of value that Spencer Steer brings to the team is that he plays pretty much the entire infield pretty equally well. There's not a lot of drop off when you move him around. He said on this very program, actually that was a lefty in the bullpen, but on the Locked On feed, he said, he likes scooting around. He likes playing different positions. He's not, when I asked Matt McClain about, what position do you play? He didn't let me finish asking the question before he said shortstop. Whereas Spencer Steer likes moving around, likes being that super utility guy. I think that's the value he brings, because if you've got a guy that likes to do it, is good at it, there's not defensive drop off when you do it, and you can play him as a full-time player without really a starting position where you get that extra guy, it just gives you so much flexibility and so much, ability to keep your other guys rested and healthy. More so than his offensive production, more so than whatever defensive metric you want to use with him. That's his real impact on the team. He's a guy that just makes everybody else on the team better by keeping them rested and healthy and able to play every day.
And something that I keep thinking about, because I was in this camp, and I know there were a number of Reds fans that were in this camp, about Max Schrock, and thinking that Max Schrock deserved an opportunity to play a little bit more, and he just kept getting hurt, and he just never had the chance to, but he had the ability to move around the diamond. Spencer Steer can do that, and Spencer Steer is better at hitting than Max Schrock is. So I think that he can be the guy. Just replace Max Schrock in your minds with Spencer Steer, and he's going to be better than Max Schrock was. And we're going to see just the flexibility, because they were moving him into like the corner outfield spots in AAA as well to try and get that under his belt and get him used to at least playing a little bit of left field. So he could be super, super valuable. And he is one guy that I don't want to necessarily, pigeonhole into one spot.
I agree. I think that's where we're both kind of saying that's what we think should happen with him. Poofy-haired fancy boy.
There's a lot of talented gloves coming up who could play some second base.
Yep,
so
that's true. Poofy-haired fancy boy is asking about Tom Browning. Are the Reds going to honor Tom Browning on opening day? I would imagine there's something on opening day. I think what the Reds do for Tom Browning is probably a season long. There'll be something on an outfield wall.
Like
there'll be a patch.
Or something.
Yeah, there'll be something. And we're talking about the guy with the only perfect game in franchise history. They're gonna do something.
And there's currently a service being held. I know it's like a visitation and a celebration of life that's being held at Great American Ballpark today. And I think it's actually going on right now. I think that's either going on right now or starts at 3. I saw an email about this, but they're beginning that process. I think that, just like they did with Joe Morgan and guys like that. I think we're talking a season long thing and not necessarily just a one game type deal.
I'm scrolling, Jeff. Sorry. We're going to go maybe 5 more minutes or so.
Maybe the anniversary of his perfect game, they have like a special like on-field thing for it. I could see that happening.
Sorry, still scrolling.
No, it's okay.
Just squeeze a few
on
more
the
before
note,
we get out
like,
of here.
Talking about the gloves and the talent coming up that can play second base. I mean, I don't think that if the Reds were to move Jonathan India, they're not creating a vacuum. They've got guys that can fill in there. They've got some dudes who can become
it's an upgrade.
An everyday second base. Yeah.
It's a defensive upgrade.
Especially you're talking about like shortstop listed prospects, maybe Matt McClain, but even, and this is still a couple of years away, but maybe you're talking about Edwin Arroyo or maybe even Jose Torres. Arroyo's better than Torres, but both of those guys could be good second basemen for the Reds in the future. Torres might be a little bit too light hitting, but
this is interesting. Let's go down this rabbit hole to wrap things up. Charlie White wants to know, if you were to move the players of the Big Red Machine around like guys move around today, would they have been the Big Red Machine? Well, they did. They did move guys around and play different positions. Pete Rose was an all-star at like 4 different positions. Yep. He did. There was flexibility with that team. Johnny Bench moved eventually from catcher and played some third base because of the legs. This is not, we are not reinventing the wheel by saying that we want the team to create positional flexibility. As a matter of fact, this is great pointing at the Big Red Machine, because they may have been, they were an innovator on a lot of things. Dave Concepcion invented the way that you play shortstop on AstroTurf. Basically, the Reds moved guys around to meet the organizational team needs versus, what a guy might have wanted to do. That's how Pete Rose ended up playing third base, because somebody had to do it and they figured, hey, you can do it. And he did it. This is not reinventing the wheel. And I think that at the end of the day, these are athletes that have, the talent to play at certain positions, maybe some better than other positions, but you put them in positions where they're not going to hurt you. And the offense is the offense. And I don't subscribe to this theory that by moving a guy, he suddenly can't hit. Not in this day and age of baseball, for sure.
I also think, and somebody's going to remember the stat. I don't remember the stat, but there was one of those like, remember this and you'll just wow your buddies with this stat, is that the percentage of time that the Great 8 actually played all together in the same lineup was something like less than 30%, I think, of the time. And it's just the way baseball is. Like, you talk about the Great 8, you talk about having a static 8-player team. That just, 8-player in the field, with your pitcher out there. And of course, now with the DH, you've got your 9-player lineup. That just doesn't happen. And even when you're talking about this scenario on the flip side, there is never going to be another Big Red Machine. It will never happen. The Yankees have yet to recreate Murderers Row. It's just not going to happen. When you have that team, you celebrate that team for what it is, and don't ever expect it to happen again. The Reds will one day achieve success. I firmly believe that. It's not going to be by having a team that we can compare to that team. That team is just so far and above what any other team could possibly be. And there's a reason that every single baseball fan that knows their history compares the Big Red Machine to the Murderers Row, because those are the two best teams that ever played this game. So for us to sit here and say, well, how are the Reds ever going to live up to they're not, but they're going to be successful in a different way. And that'll be celebrated whenever that happens.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have the idea that Sparky made a lineup and made 162 Xerox copies of it, and that's what happened. And that's not the case. And listen, I'm not taking away anything from Sparky Anderson, because to manage all of those egos the way that he did was an impressive feat of managing. And Charlie, back in the comments, I see you with they moved him around their later years. Some of the guys, Johnny Bench moved later. It was later after he caught. That's why I'm kind of being a little proactive on let's get Tyler Stevenson some flexibility now so that he's not broken down when he gets there. I think that moving guys around just makes the team better. I don't see a downside to it. I really just don't. But that's probably a great spot to put a pin in this episode, Jeff. We've gone almost an hour and a half now. This is great. I just want to say to all you folks still in the comments, still watching live right now, I love these shows. You guys make it so great. You never disappoint me. The comments are always great. The questions are always great. You challenge us. You help us keep things going and be funny. And I just love it. Love having you guys here. Love these lives. I'm going to keep doing them. Going to keep growing them out a little bit. Jeff and I are coming up with some plans to incorporate them into the regular season that we think you all will like as well. And if you have thoughts on things you'd like to see from Jeff and I, get them in the comments, hit us up on Twitter, let us know. We're always looking to evolve the show in the direction that you guys want it to go. And we're having a blast while we're doing it. So we appreciate you all. And with that being said, Jeffrey, go ahead and wrap us up.
Thank you, everybody, for joining into the comments section and giving us your comments, your questions, your thoughts, everything about the Cincinnati Reds. We look forward to seeing you next week right here on the Aloha live edition of the Locked On Reds podcast. That's 1:30 p.m. next Friday afternoon. But that's going to do it for us here today. Thanks for making Locked On Reds probably one of your first listens, being 1:30 in the afternoon, maybe not your first listen, but thanks for listening and watching to us anyway. And make sure you check out the Locked On MLB Prospects podcast, as Lindsey Crosby, he's got you ready on everything, all the future studs that are going to be coming up through everybody's farm system, not just the Reds, but he does talk about the Reds a fair amount. That's Locked On MLB Prospects, just like Locked On Reds. It's free and available on all platforms. And as we go through the offseason, there's going to be rumors, there's going to be news, there's going to be trades, there's going to be signings and all this different stuff. And we are going to be ready to tell you about how it impacts the Cincinnati Reds. Why, Steve?
Because we're going to keep everybody locked on Reds every single day.